is trying to give an understanding to what is a GMO, a genetically modified organism. Usually when I think of organisms, I don't think of corn. I think of something in the animal realm, like bacteria and things like that. But they still call it a genetically modified organism. And on the way to church here, I passed a few thousand acres of them. Your soybeans look good, your corn crop looks good. I'm told you need rain, and I guess we all do a little bit, but the crop looks not too limp or failing out there. We need something to make those ears develop properly. But the issue is, if you had to devise a system to destroy humanity, this is one of the best. Because if you change the food supply and you change the nutrient supply to the human race, you don't have a human race. So the genetically modified organism, people worry about eating these things or them getting into their system and doing all this stuff. That's really not the issue at all. In fact, it doesn't even work that way. And so I'm hoping, as a result of this lecture, you'll have an understanding of how it works, why it works, and what you're really up against. Now, I will also tell you something else. If I'm starving to death, I'm not going to ask you if your soybeans are GMO. I'm going to be very grateful and I'm going to eat them. So I want to put this in proper perspective, okay? But when you do have a choice, and we still have a choice, I'm going to hopefully recommend you make a good one. This is a medical school lecture, so it's got some pretty heavy stuff in it, but I will try to wade through that and not get bogged down on that, and we'll go on to, I'm actually trying to put two presentations into one this morning. So, gut microbial shapes intestinal immune system. You have more lymphatic tissue in your intestinal tract than anywhere else in your whole body. You may not expect to find it there, but that tells me two things the way God made us. One is your food is very dangerous for you. If you ate a banana and didn't have a liver, it would kill you. Now, some kids would be glad I said that because they hate bananas. That's not the point. I'm saying there are certain chemicals in food that if we do not have the proper detoxification mechanism, they are deadly. That's not to make you hate food or hate bananas, etc. That's not the point here. I'm trying to show you how wonderfully you are made. The intestinal tract is the main barrier between you, so to speak, and life. If it doesn't work properly, you die. Dr. Harvey Kellogg wrote books like Death in the Colon. Any of you have that book? You may not want to read it, but the point is, his goal, way back before any of what I'm going to show you this morning, had no idea, but the point was that what was happening to people's intestinal tracts back when he practiced medicine, obviously in the late 1800s into the 1900s, is what he was seeing, and he would write books like that. And it's not just because they tried to make a wasp waist and wore heavy corsets and all that. That's just deforming an organ. We're talking about the actual organ itself. So the gut microbia shapes intestinal immune response during health and disease. This is why antibiotics are exactly called because of what they are. Anti means what? And what does biotic mean? Life. When you study biology, you're studying the study of life. So they named that pill correctly. These are anti-life pills. Are you interested in a bottle of them from me? Okay. The only time you ever take an antibiotic is if you're going to die, and this would save your life. That is the only possible excuse that I can give you to take an antibiotic. We take them because we have pimples. We take them because we have a sore throat. We take them because we have a viral infection, and they do absolutely nothing for a virus. By the way, they're bacteria pills. You don't use them on a virus. But they have another side effect. The other side effect is they suppress your immune system. You go, wait a minute. You're giving me anti-life pills, you're trying to kill me off, and then you do another thing. You try to suppress my immune system. That's why they help people with viral infections. Because people say, well, I had a viral infection, I went to the doctor, gave me an antibiotic, and I felt better. I'm going, well, yeah. You just, because the reason you were feeling bad was your body fighting the problem. See, viruses don't make you hurt. Your body makes you hurt because the fight to kill off the virus is very toxic to the body. Fevers aren't caused by bacteria. Fevers are caused by your body to fight the bacteria. See, medicines try to make us think that we want to take away the fevers. Well, no. The fever is actually your friend. And we have wounded so many children by knocking their fever down when they need to kill off the bad bug. And we give them antibiotics. It's the same thing we've done in farming. Maybe some of you are farmers here. What do we do to the fields? We keep killing off anything we think is going to kill the crop. In the process, we kill the crop's nutritional value. Gut microbia. Microbia, just saying you're basically bugs in the intestinal tract. More than 1,000 different species. The collective weight of these bugs is over 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds. That's a lot of bugs, by the way, in the human intestine. Colonization begins immediately after birth. When you are born, what you eat determines your bacterial outcome. And mama, you're the best, okay? And the way God made you is you give a whole incredible dose of immunizing effect to the child when they first nurse. If you can only nurse a child for 2 weeks, you've given them a major head start. If you can do it for 2 months, more power. If you can do it for a year, more power to you. And also for your offspring. Symbiotic, that means ones that have a beneficial effect to you, provide for the host a nutrient supply. What supplies nutrients to the corn plant in the soil? Bacteria. Bacteria break down the ground to make the nutrients available for your plant. So if you don't have bacteria in the soil because they've been killed off with your high fertilizers, you actually depend on a chemical now and that. So the same thing is happening in farming. We take that right across to the human organism and we treat it the same way. Unfortunately, they're very related. You are what you eat, and you're only as good as what you eat. Immune system development and function, absolutely incredible, important for that young child. And we have more intestinal problems in children, and parents say, oh, well, they have colic, or oh, they have this, or oh, they have that. I'm going, what'd you do to them? Well, a few of the anaerobic genera, or generation, you've got the bifidobacterium. You probably recognize these names on some of your bottles you're buying now called probiotics, okay? And now they got them all the way up to 50 billion bugs. Well, 50 billion bugs is really good, but if you've got good stomach acid, it's going to kill about 49 billion of them because you put it in the top. To be quite frankly, if you want to put the bacteria where they belong, you put them in the lower end. That's where you should be putting your probiotic if you really want to get the appropriate amount where you want it. But most of us don't like that deal called an enema, and so we'd rather take a whole lot more on the top. And of course you have your Eubacterium, your Escherichia, your Enterococcus, your Streptococcus, your Klebsiella. And over here, they just give you, the CFU stands for colony formation units. These bacteria are viable bacteria, in other words. And so they're showing you from 1 to 3, 10 to the first to 10 to the third. That'd be thousands here, up here. You get down here to your jejunum and ileum, the lower part of your small intestine, and you've got 10 to the fourth power. That means 10,000 to 10 to the seventh power. That is one step above a million. Million would be 10 to the sixth. This is 10 to the seventh. So this would be a 100 million level. And so when you start talking about these bugs in the body, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, when I say you have more lymph tissue, more immune tissue in the intestinal tract, this is the wall of your intestinal tract. It's got these things called villi, and that grossly increases the surface area. If we had nothing but a flat intestinal wall, or one that undulates like this, you can see how you get a lot more surface area to absorb your nutrients, and you need that. There's blood supply in here. You have various types of cells that are immune response, and the reason you have them is because when the food comes in, it's very toxic, and therefore the body has to take away the toxins, keep the good nutrients, and then feed you. Remember, we look at our gardens, and when this bug comes along and eats your whatever, the leaves on your potato plant, okay? If they were so toxic that it killed the bug, you'd get rid of all bugs. But if they had no toxicity at all, they have no way to defend themselves. So food in and of itself has to have a certain amount of toxic level so you can be able to defend itself from its pest. Otherwise, everything will be getting eaten. I don't care how good you kept it or how good your organic soil is. The T cells over here, the blue ones, are the thymus cells, and the B cells are the bursa cells, two basically different types of immune system cells that are right there in your intestinal tract. Now, God put them there for a reason. And so I have to assume that even on a perfect diet, you still needed to have this ability to detoxify. When we develop rats, and we put rats in a germ-free environment, what happens? Well, the first thing we can learn is that the rats decrease the cell turnover in their intestinal tract. Normal intestinal tract turnover is every 5, maybe as much as 7 days. You get a whole new intestinal lining. Now, whenever you see a tissue that has rapid turnover, there's 2 things that can take place. Number 1, cancer, and number 2, wear and tear. So on your intestinal tract, when you have a rapid turnover, you wind up looking for 2 major problems. Because every time a cell duplicates, it has a genetic tendency to duplicate wrong or make a mistake. That's why you see intestinal tract cancers, colon, rectum, etc. And then you also see the other tissue in the body that turns over most rapidly is the bone marrow, so you see a lot of leukemias. Now let me ask you a question. If you take chemotherapy, what 2 systems in your body does it wipe out? Wipe out your intestinal tract, therefore you lost your ability to live. You can't get nutrition. And then it wipes out the bones because you can't make red blood cells. And we call it good, and I call it evil. And I think the good Lord will keep those alive who need to be alive for as long as they need to be alive if they're doing what He asked them to do. That might be a very jaundiced view of medicine, but that's the conclusion I'm coming to. So we got these germ-free mice. We keep them in a germ-free environment. They are basically sterilized, so to speak. They produce less antimicrobial proteins. Here's one for you. You will notice that when they have decreased rates of cell turnover, they reduce the expression of the immune system. These are macrophages here, and different classes, so I say it's a medical school lecture, and antimicrobial proteins. Fewer lymphocytes in the lumen purpura. Let's go back. Lumen purpura, here in these villi in your intestinal tract. They have fewer lymphocytes. So what does that tell you? If there's less lymphocytes there, it tells you we're having less of an immune response. We've got a sicker mouse here. Fewer smaller Peyer's patches, another immune system, isolated lymphoid follicles, mesenteric lymph nodes. So they have all this, and they produce less immunoglobulin A. All these things mean that these rats are producing less amount of immune system response. And guess what? They need less fuel and less food. So let me ask you a question. Why do you feed cows antibiotics that aren't sick? They're not sick. They don't need an antibiotic. So why do you feed them antibiotics if a cow's not sick? It's the same concept as germ-free mice. If you feed an antibiotic to a cow that isn't sick, you basically sterilize their intestinal tracts. You kill off all the good bacteria. And when you do that, guess what else you get? You get 7% increase in weight of that beef cow that if you do it. So the farmer goes, okay, if I can make 7% more income this year, and I'm making $500,000, then I just made an extra $35,000 off the same crop, and the antibiotics I have to give my animals only cost me $1,000, so I just made a profit of $34,000 on my animals just by putting one more thing in their food. It's tempting to do it, isn't it? But when you give that animal antibiotics, you create the same thing here. You create unhealthy animals. If they ever do get an infection, you've got a major problem on your hands. But then you've got another problem. You're feeding that to people. And you're feeding the milk to people and other cow byproducts. The effects of the immune system in germ-free mice. Decreased immune response to infection. We would expect that. Obviously, their intestinal tracts aren't working well, which is your immune. Decreased bacterial clearance upon Listeria monocytogenesis infection. And of course, salmonella infection, same thing, deficient colonized resistance. Basically, you've got an animal that cannot even fight disease because they've been sterilized. How many children get antibiotics before they're even out of the hospital? How many children get immunized before they get out of the hospital? How many children get hepatitis B vaccinated before they get out of the hospital? I feel, give them a chance to live at least. Inflammatory bowel disease, a big one that I treat on a regular basis. People come to me and they have irritable bowel syndrome. They go, what in the world is causing irritable bowel syndrome? I mean, I can't tell them not to get vaccinated because we're kind of past that point, aren't we? But I can tell them that the antibiotics that their parents gave them, that they lived on in their younger years, obviously wasn't healthy. See, I get the severe cases. I get the young people who are 18 years old that have lived on antibiotics literally 3 or 4 times a year for more years in their life, and they come to me and they're broken and they can't function and they don't have energy and they are just wasted and they're trying to do good to handle school. And it's not because they're not intelligent. It's because their immune systems are so broken down and they aren't even 20 years old yet. And I spend the next year after year after year trying to build up a normal system. Now, I started with GMOs. GMOs are those foods that actually can alter even the good bacteria in your bowel. See, I don't have to alter you one bit. I don't have to change anything about your genetics. I don't have to even worry about you getting genetically modified yourself. All I have to do is change the bacteria in your bowel, and I change your whole immune system. Please take it serious the next time a doctor offers you an antibiotic. He is changing your bacterial flora in your bowel, and therefore he's changing your immune system. Do you want your immune system changed? Why we have so much cancer in our culture right now? Why does the cancer continue to go up as antibiotic use goes up? Have you ever correlated those two? You look at number of prescriptions of antibiotics over the past 10 years and follow the cancer rate. You're going to see cancer going up and you're going to see antibiotic use going up over and over and over again. Okay, a few things. Inflammatory, chronic inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract in 2 forms. Crohn's disease, we've been calling an autoimmune disease. Well, why is it an autoimmune disease? That means the body's own immune system is fighting itself. Well, it truly is an autoimmune disease. Here's they're showing the actual tissue that's involved. They're showing scar tissue in the wall. This is actually an intestinal wall here. And so you're seeing that granuloma, another word for scarring, is formed in up to 60% of the bowel patients. When you get scarring in the bowel, you get poor absorption of fluid. So what does one thing a Crohn's person have? Right on through. They can't even get nutrients. It goes through so quickly. So therefore they're automatically malnourished. And then the malnourishment in the person sets them up for more deterioration of the bowel, and it's one cycle going over and over again. Ulcerative colitis affects the superficial mucosal layers, meaning that the layers are right of the intestinal tract itself. They can be ulcerated like a stomach ulcer. In other words, this tissue is gone, and they can have bleeding or they can have mucus. And it says no pathogen has been conclusively shown to be the causative agent. We can't even tell you that a bacteria or a virus is causing it, because it's not. What is causing these diseases is an imbalance of the bacteria in the bowel, causing your immune system to fight itself. It's not nice to mess with Mother Nature. You probably remember that advertisement. When we mess with what's going on, we have these effects. And down here at the bottom, it says incidence is the highest in developing countries. Folks, sometimes we can get too clean. Children that have pets living in the house, and by the way, I was raised on a farm and we didn't have cows living in the house with us. I lived inside, the animals lived outside, so I don't have a problem with that. But what the research has shown is that children that live with a dog or a pet in the house have better immune systems. My brother and I used to have a contest. Let's see who this dog loves most. How many kisses will the dog give you? One of those kind of contests, And so you get to share a little bit of bacteria, okay? But I'm telling you, I never took an antibiotic in my growing up years. My dog must have had pretty good saliva. Maybe you shared the same kind of experience when you were a kid. The point I'm getting at is that we can get ourselves so clean and so sterile, like those sterilized rats living in an environment, that we suppress the immune system. If you want healthy children, you're not going to get them by immunizing them. You're going to get them by letting a dog lick them. You're going to get healthy kids by letting them have chicken pox. You're going to get a healthy kid by letting them going even something as terrible, mom and dad, as whooping cough, because a strong kid can handle it. We're not getting healthier children by everything we're doing, so we're doing something wrong. And we're messing up their immune systems. Then GMO foods come along, and actually change the good bacteria in your bowel, and they change the immune income. As I started my lecture, there is no more successful way of destroying a population than GMO foods. It's incredible. The devil is a very good scientist. God happens to be the creator, though. I'm not going to take a lot of time with this, but basically, most of these terms tell you what kind of T cells we have, and what they're trying to show here is if you keep the T regulatory cells, the cells that do not cause an inflammatory response, you keep things in balance. I've got plenty to talk about, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time with these more technical slides. Evidence for involvement of commensal bacteria in irritable bowel syndrome. Number one, irritable bowel patients have increased antibody titers against endogenous bacteria. What are we saying here? Your body, if you have irritable bowel syndrome and we tested your antibodies, that's something your body thinks is working against them. It's made something against the protein in these endogenous bacteria. That means bacteria that you have in your bowel. We find antibodies against the bacteria that you have in your bowel. Now, when you have these antibodies trying to kill off the bacteria that they think are an invading agent in your body, what happens to the battleground? Well, the battleground happens to be your bowel wall right here. And irritable bowel syndrome people will tell you they feel like they got a battleground going on in their intestinal tract. So what's really happening is we've got a distorted immune system fighting your own body. When I was in school, it's been a few years now, we started this whole concept of autoimmune, and we had rheumatoid arthritis. That was our biggie. And we had systemic lupus erythematosus, lupus, okay? That was our two biggies, and we even had some good tests for them. Now we've gone from those relatively small handful to where there's probably hundreds or thousands we don't know about. And a lot of times when I see people, and I'm going, what is going on with this person? It doesn't fit any particular mold. I don't even have a test to test them for. Well, can't you test me? I say, listen, I know what's going on, but I can't prove it. I can test you for your rheumatoid factor, and it comes back negative. You don't have rheumatoid arthritis. But when I look at your hands, I said, I don't even care what the test says. I know what's going on here, and we're going to treat you accordingly. We're not even being able to keep up with good tests to test people. So when you go to the doctor, and he tests you all this, and you come back, and he says, you're just fine, everything is just fine, and you go, doc, everything is not fine, that's why I came here. So if you go to the doctor, and he tells you to go home and tells you it's all in your mind, it probably isn't. It probably is in your intestinal tract. Inflammatory lesions are pronounced in areas with high numbers of bacteria. Obviously, the more bacteria. Genetic variants are highly linked to irritable bowel disease, including mutant genes that, you see, with the immune system determining what the outcome is in fighting disease, it's all genetically mediated. You change the genetics, GMOs, you change the genetics of the food, you change the genetics of the bacteria in your bowel, and if you change the genetics of the bacteria in the bowel, you change the genetics of the immune system, and there you have your diseases. People are not going to die from an atomic bomb. They're going to die because they're so sickly they can't nourish themselves. Let's look at the top real quickly. The symbiotic, these are bacteria that are healthy for you. These are bacteria that break down the food. They break down the fats so you can digest them. They break down the proteins so you can digest them. They break down the carbohydrates so you can digest them properly. In fact, they break down carbohydrates that cause less inflammation on the bowel wall. Remember, any organ in the body that gets a new skin, so to speak, every 5 days is extremely irritating. There's no other tissue in the body that gets more turnover than your intestinal tract. Except if you get a sunburn every day and go out there and keep peeling like that, you probably could evoke a response on your skin. We have the commensals. A commensal organism means that they do some good and no harm. So they call them neutral. And then, of course, you have your pathogens, your pathobionts. They are the inflammatory ones. As far as a ratio here, you would like to have at least 85% of the bacteria in your bowel be good bacteria to 15% bad. Now, can you do that? Well, you really don't have a lot of choice. What we do is we emphasize the good and hopefully get. Now, when you take an antibiotic, what bacteria do you think it kills? It's not selective. In fact, a doctor, by choice, will give you what he calls a broad spectrum antibiotic. Now, that broad spectrum word means exactly that. It's a shotgun approach. It's going to kill most any bacteria that gets in its way. And I'm seeing a lot of people go back for a second, a third, and fourth dose of antibiotics because either it didn't get the bug or the bug's already resistant. And that's a whole other scary thing. Antibiotics are beyond their life expectancy, but yet we're still using them significantly. Direct bacterial species, aminated. Of course, they're going to make a few recommendations here. Dairy microorganisms that are beneficial, and so people are still eating their yogurt. Well, we're not going to take time to say how bad yogurt is, but the point is, any fermented food like that can be beneficial. You can actually get soy yogurt if you want some good bugs that way. Many of you take antibiotics, let's go back. Probiotics, pro as in for life, at least they labeled that one correctly. Act on several cell types. The epithelial cells, those are the lines of your intestine. These DCs are dendritic cells. They actually are part of the communication system, and then your T lymphocytes limit the inflammatory by induction of making more of the good, the T regulator cells. I told you this was a medical school lecture, so if you don't get every one of these T's and all the numbers, don't worry about it. Here is a bowel wall. This is the intestinal tract here. This is those cells I told you on there. These up and down we call the villi. This particular type of bacteria grows in your bowel. It's there. It's B. fraglatus. That breaks down the food to what they call PSAs. That's not public service announcement. That's polysaccharide A. That factor is like aloe vera. Some people take aloe vera to reduce their inflammation. Well, aloe vera has MPSs, mucopolysaccharides, commonly known as mucus. But mucopolysaccharides are what help to soothe the irritable wall of your stomach and on through your intestinal tract. That's why aloe is so beneficial. But the only reason people need aloe is because they've abused themselves. So this slide shows these DCs, these dendritic cells. This guy almost looks like he's got a sensor out there signaling what's going on so he can communicate to the immune system. Along comes your Helicobacter. How many of you have been treated for Helicobacter pylori? You go to the doctor and he says, I think you got this particular bacteria growing in your stomach. It causes ulcers. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a blood test, and you do that. If none of you in this room have been treated for H. pylori, then I'm in a unique group, okay? But this is H, not pylori. This is hepaticus. In other words, the one that affects the liver. So this particular organism causes an inflammatory response, and in this picture, they're showing by the cells enlarging. Gets inflamed. These cells that pick up the PSAs actually tell the response, the immune response, to produce more of the T regulator cells, and then of course they're showing where the inflammatory response happens, the body responds to it and normalize it, and these pro-inflammatory signals come in and they tell the body what to do, and you get them. If you realize what your bowel did for you every day, you'd have much more appreciation for it. You're totally dependent on this organ for your life, also for your health. Proposed causes of dysbiosis. Now that's really an old word. Not sure why they used it. It's accurate. Dys meaning discomfort, pain, and disease. Biosis, the organisms in the bowel. So the causes are, let's look at host genetics. When you modify your food, you change the genetic outcome of the bacteria. We know this because genetically modified food, we haven't been able to show that it changes the genetics of the cell in the wall of the intestinal tract. But we have shown that genetically modified corn or soy, which are the two biggies, will actually change the genetics in the bacteria in the intestinal tract. So we've gone that far. We've proved that. We haven't proved that it changes the cell. But see, I found out I don't have to change the genetics in your intestinal tract to make you ill. All I have to change is the genetics in the bacteria that signals your cell to express a gene or to suppress a gene. Last time I was here, we spent one lecture talking about epigenetics. Epigenetics is the field where we don't change your genes in a cell, we just change which ones are turned on and which ones are turned off, and that's called cancer or that's called health. Same thing here. The genetically modified food has the ability to turn your gene on and off without changing your cell. So what do we got here? Host genetics, we covered that. Lifestyle, diet, stress, etc. We know that if you are stressed out and producing way too much adrenaline, you can have everything from intestinal cramps to diarrhea. People have been so scared that they've actually had diarrhea. That's pretty scared. I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life. Early colonization, birth in hospitals, altered exposures to microbes. More and more ladies are having home births. Guess what? Home births aren't sterile. Guess what? Having a child isn't a disease. So why do they have to go to the hospital anyway? A healthy mom doesn't need to go to the hospital. In fact, they will actually give their baby a whole lot better dose of bacteria, good bacteria, by probably having the baby at home, in the home environment where everybody else is, and do a lot better. So early colonization, birth in hospitals, alter exposure to the microbes because they try to sterilize everything. Unfortunately, guess what you usually get from hospitals? You get all the bugs that are too strong for their agents, and you wind up coming home with different bugs. And of course, medical practices, vaccination use, antibiotic, hygiene. This situation here with vaccination, it defies my understanding why so much of the medical community believes that vaccinations are the answer to health. I'm talking about nurses, I'm talking about doctors, I'm talking about nurse practitioners, I'm talking about the full gamut in general buys into the concept that we can immunize you to health. In fact, we can immunize the whole world to health. If I was in standard public health practice, one of my jobs would be, if I was over the city of whatever, Cincinnati, you know that I'd have a whole office for one single purpose. I'd have a whole office, I'd have a whole division of what I did in public health would be vaccinate, and my goal would be to vaccinate every child in that city. Now you know why I couldn't be in that position. Because I'd say, don't do it. And they would say, you don't have a job. And I would say, thank you. We have tried to vaccinate people, and we're doing it to adults. Have you noticed? How many of you are over 65 and they come in there and they say, well, now you have to have your flu vaccine. And now you have to make sure you got your Hep B, especially if you have any kind of exposure. And now you have to have your shingles. Well, folks, if you got chicken pox really good when you were young, you wouldn't need this. You see, when we immunize our children to not have chicken pox, then we have to have something when they get older for shingles. So what do? We don't admit we're wrong, we make another shot. And now we give you shingles. We're missing the whole point. Yes, sir?
So it's a total misrepresentation when they say if you've had chicken pox, you're more susceptible to shingles? Is that true?
It is a total misrepresentation. If your body's immune system responded very well to the chicken pox, you should be immunized for the rest of your life. But here's the problem. The problem is that you are not being immunized well because they're not allowing you to be nowadays. And there are false immunizations called a shot, hope this thing still works, is actually a false representation. And then they give you antibiotics on top of it, and they can even make a good immune system bad. And they can prove me wrong. By the time you turn 65, you say, wait a minute, when I had chicken pox, I had it really good when I was a kid. But when I was 68 years old, I got this case of shingles that was very painful, doc. I should have gotten my immunization. I'm saying no. What you should go back and ask how many times in those 40 years or 50 years between those 2 points did you take antibiotics? You can even mess up a good immune system over the years that should work just fine for you. Still works. The microbiota promotes appropriate development of the immune system. Normal, good, healthy bacteria in a bowel gives you a healthy immune system. Most of the time we think we get our healthy immune system by not eating sugar. That's important. What I'm talking about this morning is actually more important. Immune-mediated disorders seem to involve reduced T regulator cell activity. So we lose the good part of our immune system to regulate even if we have inflammation. Now, immune-mediated disorders, these are disorders, that's a nice way of saying autoimmune disease. In my senior year in college, I did a course. Actually, they allow you when you get to your senior year to do your own course. So the course, I said, okay, I want to do a special study, and the title was Cell-Mediated Tumor Immunity. And what they were studying back in the 70s is what chemical can I give you to cause your immune system to go in high gear, and when your immune system goes in high gear, it will kill off cancer. In other words, I was trying to study how I can get your body to kill its own cancer, because that's superior to any surgeon, even include a robot. Okay? Because if I can get your immune system to turn against this cancer cell, I can kill one cancer cell right next to a non-cancer cell and still survive the good cell over here. A surgeon can't do that. It just doesn't exist. So when you hear of these people with spontaneous remission, that's what the doctors call it, of cancer, what's really happened is the immune system somehow, and we'd like to know how, got turned on and can wipe out cancer quicker than anything else you can possibly treat it for. So, what we found out in the study of epigenetics, your immune response, we found out that if we feed people certain diets, we've got a really good chance of turning their immune system on. So there you have the whole logic behind why we give a cancer patient raw foods, why we give them non-animal foods, why we give them less food. The oldest cancer treatment is starvation. I guess you realize that. Because a cancer cell cannot live anywhere near as long on the same amount of fuel supply as a normal cell. So yes, losing weight is usually a major object in that treatment. So this immune-mediated disorders means that the immune system is causing the disorder. Your own body is going against itself. That's like Crohn's disease, or irritable bowel syndrome, or rheumatoid arthritis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, or fibromyalgia. We start adding to the list, and the list goes on and on. Absence of beneficial microorganism owing to dysbiosis, bad function in the intestinal tract, can lead to induction of inflammatory response in immune-mediated diseases. The microbiome plays an important role in supporting health, and it is called a microbe or microbiome. Every human body surface is exposed to the environment. For example, the skin, the eyes, and every other part with an opening to the environment. Now think of it this way. Your intestinal tract technically is outside your body. You go, no, mine's on the inside. Well, so is mine, but think about, just go along with me for a little bit here, okay? You've got an opening here and you've got an opening there. Therefore, it communicates, so actually your intestinal tract communicates with the outside. Your bloodstream does not, unless you cut your finger, right? Your lungs, on the other hand, do. Air in, air out. Ears, eyes on the surface, nose, mouth. You start looking at your body and you realize that I've got a fair amount of exposure here. Anyway, that's what they're trying to bring out. Every part of the body with an opening to the environment, for example, respiratory, digestive tracts, has a microbiome. Does your body contain, this is an interesting question, does your body contain more of your own human cells or more microbial cells? With the question, you obviously know where I'm going, don't you? I mean, of the trillions of cells that your body has, we think we've got the most. But I'm going to tell you something, and it is before lunch, okay? You may find this a little bit hard to believe. But the weight of your stool is going to be what? I've got all that intestinal tract that sloughs off every day. Because I told you, you get a whole new intestinal lining every 5-7 days. And then I've got a whole bunch of bacteria. And then I've got some food and fiber and all that. But significant weight right there is what's happening here. There are nearly 10 times more microbial cells in and on you Then you have human cells. Why am I showing you all this? I'm not trying to be gross. I'm not trying to just give a bowel lecture. What I'm trying to do is have you have a little respect for your environment and a whole lot of respect to stay away from an antibiotic. The same thing that you get all upset about your farmer neighbor out there spraying the Roundup on the field, do you get upset that much about how you take care of your own health? There's one environment you don't want to mess up, and that's you, and that's me. The combined weight of all the microbes in and on your body surface is several pounds. The other slide showed it was 1 kilogram just in the intestinal tract, not counting everything on the surface. The intestinal tract was a kilogram. That's 2.2 pounds. And here they're using several pounds here. You may be interested to know that when you sweat, it doesn't smell bad. You go, wow, you don't know my friend. No, what makes your sweat smell bad is what? Is bacteria, not you. Your sweat shouldn't be that bad. You go, wow, you don't know, it's been hot this summer. No, it is the microbes that are living on that gives it its own odor. And if you ever worked in a laboratory where we grow bacteria, they don't smell good. They put off their own odor, and that's part of their growth. Now, what else do they do to you? Well, they give you gas. You go, that food, broccoli, is really gassy for me. Well, where'd the gas come from? Did broccoli blow up when it got inside you? No, broccoli is gassy because what does it do? It makes your bacteria grow really rapidly and really well, and the bacteria put off the gas. Okay, ladies, you make your own bread. You put all your ingredients together, and then you put your fungus in it. You go, no, I don't use fungus. Well, you do, okay. And that's okay. So you put your fungus in there, and the fungus starts to grow on some carbohydrate. Usually you put something sweet in there. It could be sugar, it could be honey, it could be maple syrup, etc., etc. And then as this thing starts to rise in this bowl, it started from something about this big, and it turns into something this big. Well, did the wheat have gas? Everybody goes off gluten. They don't even know what they're talking. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit. They go off their gluten because they think gluten gives them gas. Gluten can't give you gas, folks. Gluten can't make you bloated. It's the bacteria, in this case, back to bread, it's the fungus that makes the yeast rise, because one of the byproducts of fungus, when they eat their food, they produce carbon dioxide. So it's raised with carbon dioxide, not carbon monoxide. This is carbon dioxide, what you breathe off on a regular basis. That's what gives your bread the lift. Now, if you use baking soda or baking powder, you change the game a little bit, because now you put it in a batter, and the chemical reaction, not something eating something and putting off gas, it's a chemical reaction between the sodium bicarbonate putting off gas, and that gas is also carbon dioxide. Some of you that don't want to use baking soda, you use food-grade hydrogen peroxide. So you put hydrogen peroxide in your batter, and it puts off H2O2, so you got oxygen boiling off this thing, and it raises your pancake or your waffle or your cornbread using oxygen. So, see, we get confused. We say broccoli or beans cause gas. No, beans don't cause gas. Your bacteria. And you go, well, if beans make you gassy and they don't make you gassy, what's going on here? It's all about the bacteria that you have inside you, and some people have different types of bacteria. That's why two people can eat the same food and have different results. Enough about that. Okay, this is your intestinal tract. I guess I got to wind this up too. This is your intestinal tract here. This is the cell wall. This is the wall of the intestinal tract. This is inside. Things that happen inside your gastrointestinal tract, we've got plant fibers. You ate some broccoli, okay? You got some animal tissue. You had some cream cheese on top of it. Hopefully you didn't, but anyway, this is a story here. These animal tissues are degraded by bacteria, just like the plant fibers are broken down by bacteria. And different bacteria break it down at different points, continue in a variety of bacteria. but the lumen microbes, the bacteria that break down the food in the middle of your intestinal tract, they make short-chain fatty acids, they make methane, that's the one that gives you gas, they make acetate, they make hydrogen sulfide, and that's the one that really makes you smell bad. But notice this, lower oxygen content, this is in the middle, higher hydrogen sulfide content in the middle. Now we go out to the edge. This is where the immune system takes place. The host microbiome, gene expression. So the products that are produced inside the bowel, when they are broken down, depending on what bacteria you have, actually affects the gene expression of the cells that line your intestinal wall. Never disconnect your immune system from your bowel, otherwise you won't understand. And of course, this is a capillary, this is blood flow here, and they're calling these villi. They just make them kind of square. Now this microbial layer here, mucosal layer, like we said, the first 2 weeks of life, hopefully you were nursed by your mom, gave you bacteria that can be in your cells for the rest of your life. Gut microbe immunity, interactions with the microbes in the intestinal tract, early in life, train the immune system for distinguishing self from non-self. This is important, distinguishing self from non-self. How do you know when the immune system should have a battle? The whole area that is devastating is the autoimmune diseases. This gets confused. You assume that corn is the invader, and what do we call that? We call it an allergy. It's a deficient immune system. When the poor child that eats a peanut and his throat starts to tighten up because he's going into shock, what's wrong with that child? Are peanuts bad? Self versus non-self. It happens this young. Interaction, the gut mucosal, early years, training the immune system to distinguish self from non-self. All allergies are is a messed up, confused program on the immune system. That's an allergy. The body determines that that pollen you breathed in, that you're sneezing away at, the body's determined that that is an invading species and I need to kill it. That's an allergy. And so what do we got? We have a whole specialty in medicine called allergist. Can you believe that? A whole specialty. That's how messed up our immune systems have gotten. So when Dr. Kellogg, back in late 1800s, said death in the colon, I think he was onto something. Throughout your life, microbes secrete compounds to regulate the immune system, the T cells. These cytokines, chemokines, and other chemicals. It gets more complicated. Let me just show you a few more points because I'm running out of time too. This is microorganisms secrete compounds may determine your health. So when we look at this particular profile, you're going to see various acids across the bottom here. These are various amino acids across the bottom. But the significant is over here, you've probably already read it. The relative proportion of bacterially produced short-chain fatty acids differed significantly between stools of healthy adults and colon rectal cancer. What causes colon rectal cancer? A destroyed immune system by the foods that people eat. Let's look at these. So we got these short-chain fatty acids, SCFA, and we look at the two groups. Notice that the healthy group is the light bar and the colon rectal cancer is the dark bar. So whether you're dealing with acetic acid, propionic acid, valeric acid, butyric acid, isobutyric, and isovaleric acid, you will see the difference between what we consider healthy, some are going to be higher, and some are going to be lower across the board. The bacteria that break down these fatty acids are different in the intestinal tract of the cancer patient versus the healthy patient. Guess what we've got going on in America right now? We have a lot of people in this category that do not even have cancer yet that have a wrong distribution of their bacteria. And when we change them from a meat-based diet to a vegetable-based diet, guess what we do for their intestinal tract? You get a whole new family. You may not thought of your bacteria as friendly or a family. You get a whole change in your bacteria content in your bowel over the next 6 months. Plant fibers breed different bacteria. Different bacteria in your bowel give a different response to the intestinal tract. And that different response is all the way down to communicating what the genetic response to your immune system that keeps you healthy. Who's in control? Good question. There are 100 times more microbial genes present in your microbiome than your own genes. Did you get that? There are 100 times more microbial genes present than your own human genes. You could say, well, so what? And that's a good question. So what? The point of that is to tell you that if you look at genetic material and what genetic material can be affected, I'm more concerned about the bacteria in your bowel than even about your own immune system, because that's what determines what's going to outcome here. Microbial genes turn on or off in response to what we do. A lactooperone is just an example here. A lactooperone is a particular type of a genetic affected by lactase. In other words, milk, if you drink milk, it has a certain compound in it, lactose. That lactose will turn on and off a gene to tell me whether you're going to get cancer or not. We're down to that level of figuring out why people get cancer now. And of course, our genes turn on and off in response to what our microbes do. So it's not just smoking anymore, folks. It's not just alcohol anymore. It's not just bad drugs. What we're down to now is, what are you doing to your intestinal tract to either turn on or turn off? Obviously, what you do might change your microbial community. Obviously, it changes as we mature in age, puberty, hormonal changes, or pregnancy. Watch when people have major changes in their health. There's a major change, obviously, when young people go through puberty. There's also a major change after a person's pregnancy. Do you realize what has to happen for a lady to be able to carry a child to term? That is a totally different person inside them. That's a totally different genetic person inside them. Your body has to shut down its immune system so that it doesn't get rid of that foreign invader called your baby. Believe me, I think much more highly of babies than a foreign invader. I'm trying to make a point here genetically. When that happens, and programming it one day, and after you deliver the child, to get it back in normal program again, you watch how many ladies have problems with their immune system after pregnancy. We see it over and over again. Obviously, a change in our diets, medical condition and treatments. If we could put some level on what antibiotics and steroids have done, it's incredible. I don't even know how to evaluate that. I can just tell you that pets in the home. When I was a kid, how many times that dog licked me? He loved me more than my brother, you know. Many more factors being investigated. That's a good one. Let's finish with this slide. This is one that I made up. I'm pretty sure I've showed it here before. We'll go through it quickly. Principles of digestion. I made this slide up before I knew about epigenetics. I made this slide up before I knew about the bowel and the immune system. But I made this slide up because I was trying to understand what gives people a healthy digestive system. The digestive system from your mouth to the other end uses more energy than any other system in your whole body. So if you come in my office and you tell me you're tired, don't be surprised if I talk to you about what you're eating. If you come to my office and you tell me that, you know, I wake up worn out, I probably will ask you what you ate before you went to bed. If you want to have more energy, you will cut your fuel supply. You say, wait a minute. I thought if I want more energy, I got to put more fuel in. Well, no, that works for your car, okay, but it doesn't work for you. Number one, the stomach is not an intestine. Well, obviously I do know my anatomy, and you know yours. But the stomach is a totally different organ in how it operates in digestive process. Very minimal digestion takes place in the stomach. There are some things that are absorbed. Sugar can be absorbed, Probably alcohol can be absorbed when you put something in the stomach. So let's start at the top. Your mouth, you're going to chew your food, hopefully. And you're not going to have so much liquid, we call it washing it down. That's when you only have 5 minutes to eat. And doctors are accused of that, and so I understand it. So the stomach is made to handle protein, to digest protein. It doesn't digest fats well. It doesn't digest carbohydrates well. Carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth. When you chew your food, you have saliva enzymes that break down your carbohydrates. If you've got a good piece of whole wheat bread, the longer you leave it in your mouth, what happens? The sweeter it tastes. Your enzymes are actually breaking down the complex carbohydrates into simple, and those sugars, and it actually tastes better. So carbohydrate in the mouth, protein in the stomach. Where's fat? Fat digestion does not take place until you get to your small intestine and passes the pancreatic duct, and the pancreas pushes out its enzymes to help it digest the fat. So we got a problem on our hands. Let's talk about a French fry. If you eat a French fry, it's a carbohydrate coated with fat. Well, where does that start getting digested? Well, not usually in the mouth. The stomach, maybe a little bit. So you got some almost raw food being passed into the intestinal tract right away. Now, when God made you, He gave you something up here that a lot of people have gotten taken out in my generation. Tonsils were taken out when I was a child like they were wisdom teeth. You know, everyone has to have them out. I was very fortunate. I wasn't sick like my two brothers were. In fact, I was probably the healthiest kid in the family. They used to call me the soy milk baby. Maybe it had something to do with it. I didn't have the cow milk and goats, and had it both when we were growing up, small farm. But the point was, my older brother and my younger brother both got their tonsils taken out. And when they came home from the hospital, they got ice cream. And I thought that was a ripoff for me, because they claimed that their throat was so sore they couldn't eat anything else, right? You know, one of those kind of excuses. Well, so tonsils at the top end are lymph tissue. They kill bacteria on contact. The stomach is full of acid. It kills bacteria on contact. By the time food gets to your small intestine, it should be pretty sterile. Now, at the other end of the small intestine, God put what? He put a valve, but He also put your appendix. What is an appendix? An appendix is lymph tissue, more immune system tissue, because the large intestine is where your bacteria is supposed to be, to help do everything we talked about today, to break it down, to affect your immune system, to digest things, etc., etc. Most digestion in your small intestine takes place due to chemical reactions. Most digestion in your large intestine takes place due to bacterial connections or bacterial breaking it down. So let's go through it. Carbohydrate in the mouth, protein in the stomach, fats a little bit lower down. Your stomach is a highly energized organ. It requires about 20% of your blood flow when it's active. The more and the longer you keep your stomach active, the more tired you're going to be. You can choose how you want to use your energy. You can use it on your stomach, or you can use it on having a good day. Hopefully you're going to use a little bit of both, not too much on the stomach. So when I say the stomach is not an intestine, the intestine is a 24-hour organ. It works around the clock. It's digesting, pushing food through. That's a 24 organ. Much lower metabolically, moves a lot slower. Your stomach is made to process the food and push it along. Number two, optimal digestion takes place on a rested stomach. The biggest argument I can tell you to make breakfast your largest meal is assuming that you didn't eat at midnight. The breakfast should be your largest meal because that's when you're most rested, you can handle the most fuel, and you've got the strongest digestive juices. So yes, you should have basically your heartiest meal for breakfast. So when I tell people I have my potatoes and broccoli and an oat patty or whatever, and I eat that all for breakfast, they look at me like I'm from Mars. You don't have to eat that way, but you should eat your largest meal and obviously your heaviest meal, digestive process meal. On the rest of it. Give proper time between meals, and the stomach needs time to recover. Fat determines the workload of the stomach. Your stomach can process about 10 grams of fat. Do I have it down here? No, I don't. 10 grams of fat per hour. I drive past this truck stop on the way to work, and they have a sign out front. Haven't seen it for a while. It said truckers special. No, it says manager special. 1 pound steak, fries, drink, and whatever. Okay. Well, a pound of steak is 16 ounces. Steak is processed by your stomach at 1 ounce per hour. About 10 grams of fat per hour. That's what's in an ounce of steak. So I've got 16 hours on the steak. On the French fries, another 4 to 6 hours. So I'm up at 20, 22 hours. And if they have apple pie with some ice cream on to polish off this meal, I've got food in the stomach, not in the intestinal tract. Remember I said the intestinal tract is 24 hours. I've got food in the stomach for up to 24 to 26 hours if they don't eat another thing for the next 24 or 26 hours. Now you know why we have accidents on the road. We have people who have so much blood going here, when they're tired, it's not going up here. And that's why people fall asleep in church. Have you noticed? The worst time to take a class is at 1 o'clock for the professor as well as the student. Number 3, give proper time between meals. Number 4, the stomach excretes. Now remember this. When we say excretes, we mean putting fluid into it. The stomach excretes 2 to 3 quarts of fluid daily. How much fluid do you have in your bloodstream? And when I say fluid, I'm not talking about cells. Blood is usually about 42% cells, and the other 60% fluid. So if you have 12 pints, which is for an average person, that's about right. If you have 12 pints of fluid, how many quarts is that? Well, divide it in half, okay. So if I have 12, then I've got 6 pints, no, I'll get it, 6 quarts of blood. And if half of that blood is fluid and half cells, I'm being liberal here, that's down to 3 quarts. You see what it said? The stomach secretes 2 to 3 quarts of fluid daily into your stomach. Where does that fluid come from? It's only one place. We're not talking about what you drank for the meal. That comes from your bloodstream. That means it is possible in a 24-hour period for all the fluid in your bloodstream to have gone to the stomach and reabsorbed and come back again. You're starting getting a feel for how much energy this organ takes. The stomach emptying does not mean hunger. That is the biggest misnomer that most people understand. Well, my stomach is growling. Well, last time you met a dog that was growling, what did you do? You said, yeah, I threw up my hamburger and ran. Well, you could say I fed it. You're not supposed to. If a dog is growling, it's because it's angry and wants your leg. It may or may not be hungry, I don't know. But most time we think that a stomach that's growling means I'm hungry. No, a stomach that's growling means it's mad at you. You've done something wrong. Stomachs don't growl unless they've got a problem. It could be gas. It could be something that's indigestion. It could be something it can't digest. I don't know. But a growling stomach does not mean hunger. Most of us say, well, my stomach is growling. I can't go to bed. I have to eat something before I go to bed. My stomach hurts. Well, you ought to go back and look at what your whole stomach is trying to tell you. Give the stomach 5 or 6 hours between meals. That's if you're eating well. If you're eating the truck driver's meal, he's got to give 25 or 30 hours between meals. If he did that, he would probably be a little bit smaller truck driver. And number 7, 2 meals a day is a good option for many people. I said for many people. There are some people who need more fuel. There's some people who either can't hold enough or their job demands it. I had this one guy, he came in the office and he said, I've become vegetarian. I've been vegetarian for about 3 or 4 months. He said, I've lost like 20 to 30 pounds. I said, what do you do? He says, I work construction. I says, well, what are you eating? He says, whatever I can. He says, the only thing I can get is, everywhere I go, the only thing they can feed me is just baked potatoes and salad. Well, he's still eating at the steak place without the steak. He can get a baked potato and a salad there. Well, he can't live on baked potatoes and salad and burn 4,000 calories a day because he's only eating 1,000 calories and he's burning 4. It's not going to work out. He needs to go to the beans and rice restaurant. or he needs to make it at home. So you need to balance your caloric intake with your workload, and your speedometer is your waistline. That tells you how fast you're growing or how fast you're losing. And some of you need more fuel and some of you less fuel. So these are just a general rule. For people like me, most of the time, 2 meals a day is my best option because most of my work is sitting down. Most of my work is not usually physical. The days that I'm home on the farm and working hard, I'll just eat more at those 2 meals, but rarely eat 3 meals. Unless you're hanging out with some young people like my kids and they'd like to eat all the time. I'm sure I was exactly the same way when I was that age, but I'm not that age anymore. I can't go to a restaurant and clean up. See, back when I was that age, we'd go to the restaurant and it would be all you can eat for $1.99. Remember those times? And they probably were glad to see you go. Because if 5 college guys goes in there, they probably are getting their money's worth plus. Now I think if I went back to one of those kind of places, they would probably make money on me. Maybe I should, just to pay them back for what I did when I was in college. But you can't eat that way. And by the way, it wasn't that healthy for me while I was in college. Just as I could put up with it because I had a high metabolic rate. Just because a person is thin and can eat a huge amount doesn't make it good for them. It just means they can put up with it. Or some people look at you and they go, oh, you're thin, you can eat what you want to. Well, no, that doesn't give you the entitlement to eat what you want to. So, the take-home message is number 1, your immune system is directly regulated by what you eat. This is just one more way of saying you got to take care of what goes in your mouth. Because it goes all the way down to the genetic level, and the genetic level is determined by how you take care of your intestinal tract. So whether you have something as severe as Crohn's or irritable bowel syndrome or something as mild as indigestion and bothers you all the time or major bloating, look at what you're going on. And as I said in the beginning, please only use an antibiotic if you're going to die. I don't want people to die, and I happen to believe that antibiotics have actually saved some people's lives. I think it's shortened their life, but I think it's saved their life. Because antibiotics have helped people whose immune system was so overtaken that they would have died without them. But we are using them to the point now where we are killing more people with them than we're helping with them. That's our problem. So anyway, I need to close. What do we need to do, Gary? Close with prayer? Let's kneel together and ask the Lord to bless. Father in heaven, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I pray that we will accept the gift of health that you have given us as stewards, that we will realize that you are a God that wants to heal and make us strong. And I pray that we may understand one more reason why you told us the menu and the diet that you expect us to be on. And we're thankful for that. And we pray that you'll please bless each person here in their walk in health. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.